Hello, class. So continuing on with chapter 5, we're now going into a section on skin pigmentation, uh, how skin gets its color, basically. And this is going to be important for numerous reasons. All right, so skin color is mostly determined, as we talked about before, the amount of melanin, um, is produced by the melanocytes and the stratum basal. Remember, the stratum basal is the layer of the epidermis that is closest to the dermis, all right, the deepest layer of the epidermis. So it's going to be close to the blood supply, also close for the purposes of receiving oxygen as well. Nutrients, oxygen, nutrients, blood supply, everything that it can receive from the underlying dermis, right? And this is composed of two molecules of amino acid, right? This melanin, tyrosine. We may remember this from that chart we looked at when we were talking about the process of going from DNA to RNA to proteins. Tyrosine is one of the amino acids. Melanin is composed of two molecules of amino acid tyrosine. They're chemically bound by a series of reactions and occurs in a certain stepwise fashion in a special vesicle called a melanosome. And the primary function is to protect the keratinocyte DNA from mutations by UV radiation. Now you may say, that's interesting. Yes, very interesting, because DNA, why do we need to protect it? That should be probably one of your first questions that you ask in reading this slide, because DNA can mutate, as you see here. And a mutation in your DNA, if you remember, DNA is transcribed into RNA and then translated into proteins, right? So if we have a mutation in our DNA, then that could mess up many things, the whole function of the cells. And remember, the cells are the basic unit of life. So mutations in our DNA can be very problematic, which can happen from UV radiation, which comes from the sunlight. So we have to be protected from that UV radiation, and melanin helps to do that. We're going to talk about, you'll see in the next slide, the structure of the melanocyte. It has, it's kind of like, almost like tentacles. Think of like an octopus shaped, because it can pierce the plasma membranes of the neighboring keratinocytes and the stratum basal and stratum spinosa. And then the melanosomes migrate to the end of the extent. Those are the vesicles containing the melanin, and they're released by exocytosis and taken into the cytoplasm of the keratinocytes. Remember, these keratinocytes near the base of in the stratum basal and spinosum are still mitotically active. All right. And then we have, our melanin, which is transported to the superficial side of the nucleus, shields the DNA, kind of like an umbrella, provides like a shield for your DNA. It's important that it's continuously produced. First of all, you maintain a consistent skin color, but it also, you want to maintain that shield, right, so that our DNA doesn't mutate. So this is the structure of the melanocyte, right? Melanin producing cells, all right? See, it has like these arms that sort of extend into like to the surrounding keratinocytes. Melanin synthesis, the creation of melanin, increases with exposure to natural or artificial UV radiation. Some people like to go to what we call tanning beds, things like that. But we all tan in a way when we are out in the sunlight, for instance. Normally, we associate that with a hot day, but it's any time that your skin is exposed to sun for long periods of time. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a hot day per se. It could be a cooler day if you have short sleeves on. Your skin is exposed to the sun for long periods of time. It's the UV radiation, not necessarily the heat, and that leads to what we call tanning, but it's basically a darkening of your skin. And what is happening is you have oxidation. Remember, oxidation and reduction, uh, you add electrons. Oxidation, you remove electrons. So oxidation of the melanin already present in the keratinocytes, which causes melanin to quickly darken. You also have a secondary effect. So UV light causes DNA damage, um, which can appear within 72 hours. Um, uh, I mean, DNA damage, but which stimulates melanin production, which can appear within 72 hours and last longer than melanin oxidation, right? So cause like the production of more melanin, right? So you can oxidize the melanin you already have, or you can produce more melanin due to UV light. We have other things that we can recognize by looking at your skin, and that's why I have this slide in here. The skin is I've mentioned this before, the skin is a diagnostic tool that can be used, and we oftentimes use it. If someone's skin is darker than usual, we know that they've been out in the sun, for instance, right? So that's something that we can tell based on looking at your skin. Very simple. So from that, you could maybe say, oh, they could potentially be dehydrated on a hot day because they've had so much time in the sunlight and their skin is darkened and they've been under. It could be under a lot of heat if it's on a hot day per se. But we also have erythema, which is blood flow in the dermis increases. This is somebody who's, you may have seen it, someone's face go red. This can happen in many situations. Some people call it being flush, your face being flush. It's more difficult to see if you have a darker skin tone than like myself. It's harder to see, but this is a normal response. Your body is trying to release heat. All right. So remember we talked about temperature control. So if my body is hot, it will send more blood to the surface. Surface meaning the dermis, and therefore more heat will be released from my body, and so it will look like more blood is flowing underneath my skin. My skin will turn. If I have a lighter skin color, my skin would turn red. Right. You can also have that when you have an infection or you have a fever, right? Your body's hot, and so it's trying to cool itself off, right? Pallor, blood flow in the dermis decreases. That's results in loss of normal pinkish hue, most visible also in this is in pale-skinned individuals. Epidermis takes on a whitish color of collagen in the dermis, all right? Your skin, for people who are white, your skin kind of goes white, so to speak. And this is, some people associate this with fear, but it's really common when the body's cold, right? So what's happening is blood is flowing away from the surface of the skin. Is the blood is staying more towards the internal organs where it's nice and warm, therefore trying to conserve the heat loss of your body. All right, and you see here it can also be part of your fight or flight response when uh, your nervous and endocrine system alter your blood flow, uh, alter the blood flow that flows to the dermis. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the nervous and the endocrine system. But think about it really quickly. If I'm going into fight or flight mode, like if I'm scared of, something, a bear, I'm walking down the forbidden path in Mount Airy, and a bear jumps out. Now, I would be scared, and you wouldn't be able to see my skin go white because I have dark skin. But if I was a lighter skinned individual, you would see my skin go pallor, would go pale, because the blood would be flowing to my quadriceps, biceps, triceps, hamstrings, glutes, so that I could run very fast to get away from this bear. I know they say you're supposed to like lay down and play dead, but I ain't playing dead, because I'd be too scared. I would actually be dead. So I'm just being silly, but yes, that's what would happen. And then we have cyanosis, which is a sign that someone needs immediate attention. This is low blood hemoglobin, right? And we haven't talked about a lot about the circulatory system, but if your body doesn't, if you have low oxygen in your blood, your skin turns this like reddish purple. Some people say blue. Um, this can happen, and for instance, someone who's choking, um, they're not getting oxygen into their blood. Oxygenated blood tends to look red. Deoxygenated blood tends to turn more of a bluish or a reddish purple color, and therefore you have what we call cyanosis. Right? So if you saw somebody turning blue, you'd be like, oh, they can't breathe. They're not getting oxygen to their blood. And I need to do something very quickly, like CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation.